Welcome to Deleted Saves. On this episode, Bloodsucker, the remainder of the Legacy of Kain series. Oh, the children of the night. How many games are we going to make with you? Well, a lot, as it turns out. Many of the video games I have played over the years have in some way had a vampire as an antagonist or protagonist. Castlevania, Vampire the Masquerade Redemption, Darkwatch, Vampire Hunter D, Vampire, Nocturne, The Witcher 3, Hunter the Reckoning, Ravenloft, Strahd's Possession, Darkstalkers, Evil West. And those are just the games I have reviewed on this show or played on my own. There are many, many more than this available for players. I've honestly never liked vampires as a common mythical monster. I feel that, like zombies, they have been completely played out, and coming up with new twists on the myth is getting harder to do. Yet the concept of a powerful undead blood drinker, as both sympathetic antihero and vicious antagonist, remains a powerful touchstone among developers. Or perhaps they are a simple shorthand for when they need a new bad guy that will be easy to sell to fans. Yet for well-written vampires in games, my money has always been on the drama and wordplay between frenemies Kain and Raziel, the stars of the games Blood Omen, Legacy of Kain, and Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver. I have previously reviewed both of these games, and hold a love for both titles in my heart. I've never said the gameplay was the star of the show, but the story is the star. You play these games to be told a great story, and the play is secondary. If that bothers you, you will, to put it bluntly, miss the point and miss out entirely. I personally don't need a game to play buttery smooth to enjoy a title, but I'm in the minority on that. However, there are 5 games in the Legacy of Kain series, and the rest do not quite live up to the quality of the 2 games I reviewed. But let's get into that. The original game concept was put forth by Dennis Dyack, former president of Silicon Knights Studio, about a vampire game called The Pillars of Nosgoth. And with some tweaking, it was set in a dark fantasy game about a selfish nobleman killed and resurrected as a vampire by a traitorous member of the Land of Nosgoth's 9 mystic defenders. The story involved themes of destiny, free will, mortality, redemption, Jewish mysticism, Islamic art, Gnosticism, horror fiction, Shakespeare, despair, hope, and illumination, along a novel-length plot that was eventually to fall into the hands of Amy Hennig, also of Uncharted fame, who would write the majority of the series. But neither Kain nor Raziel would really be who they came across as, all 5 titles worth, if not for the recurring voice talents of Simon Templeman and Michael Bell, the respected players of both of these characters. These 2 men brought these vampires to life, for what that is worth, and added a level of gravitas and nuance to these roles that they probably did not really need or deserve, but these titles are all the better for it. Yet the rest of the series has issues for all its deep and dreaming themes. The game that in the series after Soul Reaver was next in line was 2001's Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver 2, picking up immediately after the abrupt ending of Soul Reaver 1. Once again, in the clawed feet of our ruined vampire Raziel, the Wraith is immediately confronted by Mobius the Time Streamer, the only member of the Circle of Nine to have survived the first Legacy of Kain game. And by survived, I mean he was killed in that title, but because he can manipulate time itself, and time travel is an inherent part of the vampire story, Mobius was able to see all eventualities and prepare for that coming of both Kain the Despot and Raziel the Redeemer, and he planned to manipulate both of them for his own ends to escape his fate. For you see, in Nosgoth, the game's setting, all fates and destinies are predetermined and immutable, and death can be the only constant or reward, be it human or vampire. Yet Raziel's new nature and existence outside of this wheel of predestination presents new opportunities for those bold enough to grab them, at the cost of Raziel's life, of course. And he certainly has no plans to give up on his quest to avenge himself on Kain, his defiler and creator. Raziel is beset on all sides by those who wish to manipulate him for his vengeance. Kain, stating that he can turn aside fate and forge a new existence. Mobius, who seeks to destroy all vampires, as was ensured in the ancient times, and save himself. The Elder God, an entity and center of entropy literally feeding off Raziel's lust for murder. And Vorador, an old vampire not seen since Blood Omen, and Kain's original mentor, who sees Raziel as the prophesied second coming of a race called the Hilden. In fact, the only one not out to warp Raziel's perspective is Janos Aldrin, a character that was simple flavor text for a recurring item in Blood Omen that has now been transformed into a pivotal plot point for the remainder of the series as the last great member of the Hilden race. All of this ties back to an ancient war between two races, the Ancients and the Hilden, the former of whom raised the Pillars of Nosgoth, and the latter of whom cursed upon their enemy and created the first vampires. All of this time manipulation results in two key points. That Raziel is inextricably bound to the game's title weapon, the Soul Reaver, a ghost sword bonded to his loosely shackled soul, and now that it is released from its physical form, once in the hands of Kain, it hungers so much that it will even harm his owner. And two, that all of this work has fucked up the time stream so badly it has rewritten how major historic events have played out, who should have stayed alive and who should have stayed dead, and that Raziel's vengeance and escape from this cursed existence has only been delayed. The story is, of course, above reproach, especially for an early 2000s video game. The gameplay is another matter entirely, mostly devolving into a series of environmental puzzles revolving around manipulating colored air vents and rotating boxes, broken up by fights with enemies that take far too long and are, at best, pro wrestling level of slapfests and poorly optimized, trekking across the various manipulated time periods of Nosgoth, becoming more of a slog than an exploration with wonder and thrills around every corner. The story is great, but unfortunately the developers had to make a game out of Amy Hennig's story, and Crystal Dynamics, the developer, was perhaps not the best studio to do this, and they admitted they had no larger plans for the series beyond wanting sequels. Compared to the two games that came before it, this game is a letdown. Doubling down on this trend was 2002's Blood Omen 2, released 6 months after Soul Reaver 2. This game encompasses a select time period after the end of Blood Omen, where, spoilers ahead, Kain refused to sacrifice himself for the good of Nosgoth, and the world has been devolving into a bleak hellscape where various vampire tribes fight for dominance and control of the human herd. Kain, leading his own armies, is driven into torpor by his own vampire lieutenants and is awakened by members of a vampire-human resistance in the hope that he will know how to kill his own men. This is the only game where Amy Hennig was not involved. It was, however, developed by another known entity in the video game world, Glenn Schofield, of Dead Space and Striking Distance Studios fame, with a team he built within Crystal Dynamics. Blood Omen 2 is an alternate timeline game, supposedly created by the time-streaming events of Soul Reaver 2. I'll try to summarize this game, but look, this thing is a fucking disaster from start to finish. The story goes as follows. Due to the events created by Raziel trying to revive the Hilden, this time sees Kain at war with a revitalized Hilden about 1200 years too early, and the return of the Sarafan warriors who once and long ago drove vampires to the brink of extinction. This whole adventure takes place in the city of Meridian, the Victorian-adjacent industrial capital of Nosgoth, with a new magic called glyph magic that vampires cannot use. This game has little in the way of actual names of characters. Instead, all the major characters are known by titles such as the Builder, or the Seer, or the Cabal, or the Sir Not Appearing in this picture. This is bad writing, trying too much to ape ham-fisted and piss-poor fantasy novels, the kind of books that litter the Goodwill bins. A lot of the twists and turns later, the kind one can easily see coming, Kain meets again with his old mentor Vorador and his possible vampiric love interest named Uma. He confronts an entity known only as the Hilden Lord, who says Uma is a spy for him. Kain refuses to believe it, then believes it and kills Uma, and through contrivance and poor puzzles at inappropriate times, Kain regains the Soul Reaver and some sort of other MacGuffin, and uses it to kill the Hilden Lord, and leaves the city pondering his next plans. To say this game is a disappointment compared to its series brothers is something of an understatement. Battle is stilted and unbalanced. The abilities Kain gets through the game are hard to use at best. The exploration is dull and banal. The city, for some sort of fantasy industrial revolutionary massive complex, is pedestrian and locked into sections behind story progress, and is far from impressive given the opportunity to be stunning even on PS2 graphics. And if there is any sort of quality to be found in the slipshod storytelling, I have yet to uncover it. This is a poor showing from a title attached to a series known almost entirely for its storytelling. The inept gameplay and bland, boxy graphics do little to assist or improve this title. Blood Omen 2 is the black sheep of this dark fantasy tale, and not one I can in any way recommend. And that hardly matters, as it is a side story at best, so you can skip it and lose nothing. The last game in the main series is 2003's Legacy of Kain Defiance. This game is the culmination of 6 years of continuous stories around the land of Nosgoth and the dance between the damned nobleman Kain and his former vampire hunting paladin turned vampire turned wraith, Raziel. This is the only game in the series where Kain and Raziel are both playable, but not simultaneously, and this wraps up all the loose ends of the series. Kain's half of the game takes place in the future, post Blood Omen 2, and Raziel's part takes place during the original Blood Omen game. I will say this game may not be the best in the story department, but the gameplay, combat, and exploration are perhaps the best in the series overall, which is sad to say they had to get all the way to the end to get the basic controls under control. This is a convoluted story, but here's the sort of it. Raziel is effectively chasing the original Kain, dogging his every step through Blood Omen. He even confronts Kain's past self for refusing to sacrifice himself, fights the Elder God who brought Raziel back from oblivion, and speaks more with Janos Odrin, until his timeline merges with Kain's. Kain, for his part, has been chasing Mobius the Time Streamer, trying to unlock and untangle the mess that is the Hilden and the Ancient Lords, and trying to clean up the mess his past self made charging through Nosgoth during his very first quest for vengeance. It all slams together like two freight trains in the night, when Raziel absorbs a particular soul that finally purifies the Soul Reaver. But he was never supposed to wield it. The blade was always meant for Kain. And in the process, with the newly forged Blood Reaver, Kain kills Mobius once and for all, causing Mobius to go to the spirit world where Raziel, who is barely hanging on, stabs him and destroys his soul, and this event allows Kain to see the Elder God, who has been manipulating events in the background, for the first time, whereupon Kain is able to slay the Elder God with the purified Soul Reaver and end this endless cycle of predetermination and fated death, allowing all life in Nosgoth, both vampire and human, to finally achieve free will. With the Pillars of Nosgoth finally restored to their proper form after 5 games and 6 years of development, Kain thanks Raziel for his sacrifice and goes back to contemplating his role within Nosgoth. How nice of Kain to dodge sacrificing himself yet again, and instead get his dog's body to do it for him. Ever the selfish nobleman. And that is pretty much the last game in the Legacy of Kain series that we got. Well, maybe not quite. Allow me to elucidate. In 2013, rumors coming out of Square Enix London Studios, who had the IP at the time, said there might be a new Legacy of Kain game in the works after a decade of nothing. Well, the leaks revealed not a single-player story, but an arena combat multiplayer online 3-on-3 shooter named Nosgoth, in which the same universe was to be used as the Legacy of Kain games, but it would be a vampire hunters versus vampires kind of game. Some of you may be thinking that sounds like Overwatch, but with vampires. But from the footage that got released, the game was more like Unreal Tournament, but with even less fun. Fans certainly thought so, as did players unfamiliar with the trials of the vampire Kain, but who were absolutely aware of arena shooters, as it went into open beta in 2015. No one was happy with Nosgoth, and the game never fully released, shutting down for good in 2016. In 2008, it was revealed a sixth Legacy of Kain game, named The Dark Prophecy, was in development by Ritual Entertainment until it was cancelled in 2004. And in 2013, it was revealed by Crystal Dynamics that yet another Kain game had been in development for the PlayStation 4 by Climax Studios. That game was subtitled Dead Sun and was pretty far into development. The footage leaked to YouTube showed a tribal human world long after the time of either Kain or Raziel, and the people have enshrined those two in myth. Vampires exist now as ghosts looking to possess the living, and with Amy Hennig gone from the writing of the game and from the studio, the vampire hunters are mostly mortal women with their tits out. I'm not kidding about that part. I'd been wondering how long it would take the developers to get around to something like that. But Dead Sun was cancelled in 2012, and that's been it until now. When Embracer Group took over the IP from Square Enix, they put out a poll asking if gamers even remembered the Legacy of Kain series and if they would like another game. People responded with an overwhelmingly positive answer to the question, and we got a remaster of Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver 1 and 2 in 2024. Not exactly what we were hoping for, but better than nothing, I guess. Developed by Asperst Games, it is largely a graphic upscaling of those first two games, with no real changes other than to try and revive a 20-year-old franchise. It has certainly gotten attention, and who knows? Maybe this is the best they could do. I personally think this re-release is a fishing expedition, trying to drum up support for the dead franchise and see if it is worthy of getting a new title. Much like what they did to the remake of Silent Hill 2. Having new developers work on a little magic on the franchise by companies who dropped out of the video game race long ago to see if the suckers are still around and willing to have a new game put out. I get it. Video game development is hard and costly, and no company wants to sink millions into a product that will flop. Silent Hill 2 Remake did well by any metric I can find. Soul Reaver 1 and 2 Remaster has not done as well, unfortunately. I guess that says something there, doesn't it? So where are we now, in the early days of 2025, with the dregs of the Legacy of Kain series? I honestly would like to see a new game, or at least one more game in the modern day. It's not like the games were poorly received either. The first two games, Blood Omen and Soul Reaver 1, still sit at roughly the mid-80s to low 90s on Metacritic. The other three games, which I've given a synopsis of above, are lower, however, sitting at roughly 67 to 74% on Metacritic. They are okay, but they did not set the world on fire. I enjoyed most of them, but the quality begins to drop off sharply as the series dragged on. And I'm hardly the most respected video game reviewer out there, so my opinion matters little, but it's still there. Yet the games, as far as vampire fiction in video games goes, are well regarded as the pinnacle of its subgenre, to the point of being seen as the Shakespeare of video game vampires. Even howling about "what is a man" has hardly registered against the gravity of the delivery by Simon Templeman in what should have been otherwise an utter cheese fest of a game. The Houston Press states that the voice cast of Legacy of Kain is, quote, the greatest unrecognized brilliance in video game acting, end quote. IGN's Douglas C. Perry said of the series, quote, a strangely attractive, yet equally obscure one that he had torn between loving and hating it, end quote. I love those two quotes. They perhaps best encapsulate the inherent dichotomy of the series. Love it or hate it, the dynamic delivery is second to none. Yet this game series is quite obscure in the library of gaming. It's not totally unknown, but it's not like there's anything strange about it. But it is unusual to come across another player who has tried any of these games when they were first released, let alone the whole series. And because of this, the performances get lost along the way. That is why I like to beat the drum regarding these games and their quality. This is a good series. If you want a great story told in a dramatic fashion, worthy of being on the very stage of the Globe Theatre. Yet if you are a fan of the underworld movies hoping for a run and gun murder spree involving vampires, well, that shit just ain't happening. Hell, it wasn't going to be happening much on the PlayStation 1. The fact that Darkstalkers ran like ass on home console is proof of that. And that's where, of course, everything started, and it didn't improve in the jump to the PlayStation 2. And this is just me personally saying this. I want a good story in a game. I can deal with substandard gameplay if I'm entertained. I know many others can't do that, but I'm not worried about them. And really, try these titles if you haven't otherwise. It's definitely worth it, even if you have trouble with the gameplay. These are plot games, like so many of your darling little indie titles. But let's be honest. Will we really get an all-new, from-scratch Legacy of Kain game? Probably not. I would be genuinely surprised if I'm wrong. But I think this is a concept whose time has passed. The magic of these games was the casting and the writer, and all those people have moved on. It was one of those lightning in a bottle events, a rare alignment of the stars of talent. But at the end of the day, the developers had to make a game out of those big words, and they were hardly the same caliber as the speaker and the scribe. And we got the games we got. Yet this hardly refutes my earlier statement. Play these games. Enjoy them for what they are. Maybe this recently announced at time of writing game called Blood of Dawnwalker will be the spiritual successor of the Kain series when Kain himself is no longer available. Or maybe not. Vampires do suck after all. But if nothing else, Kain and Raziel should be inducted into the greatest video game vampires Hall of Fame. They have certainly earned it. I'm really trying not to end this review on a Fangs for the Memories joke. I feel it would be a grave mistake. Thank you for listening. Deleted Saves would like to thank Brad, Keith Gasper, Orden Wells, and Mass Lama for being patrons of the show. If you would like to go become a patron of the show, please go to patreon.com and check out Deleted Saves podcast. All donations go directly towards maintaining the show itself. Thank you.